Hey, it's Gerald from Lakers Fast Break. Anchor is the easiest way to make your next podcast. It's absolutely free, and their creation tools will allow you to record and edit your show right from your phone or your home computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on great podcast outlets like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started on your next podcast.
I got my opinions ready to go on that.
I bet you do, and let's get it
Fire
underway
away.
right now.
Fire away.
And we're back with another episode of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. You heard us talking already, and we're gearing up right now. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Lakers Fast Break, Pop Culture Cosmos, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and Game Source. We truly thank you for listening to all of our great shows. And if you can, please give us that 5-star review, on Apple Podcasts, or like, subscribe, share, or just tell a friend about our show. We truly appreciate it. We've had some really great episodes as of late, not only with LakerTom. TJ was back on the show after paternity leave with the birth of his new son, so it was great to have him back. Also as well, some great conversations recently with Stone Hansen, Michael Weisenberg, and of course Rafael Barlow on the NBA draft. And our last episode with Rafael Barlow that just dropped, some great stories that he talked about watching games overseas and the passion that they have from basketball fans worldwide. Some great subjects that we touched on our last episode. So I hope you give our shows from the past a listen as well. But right now with me today is my usual guest for the week. It's just so awesome to have him on once again. You got to go ahead and check out his site and be part of the conversation today at Lakerholics.net. I know him as Tom Wong, but you know him as LakerTom. And LakerTom, always good to have you back on the program.
Glad to be here, Gerald. Looking forward to it.
I know you were gearing up, you're ready, and just tell you what, it's just a lot of exciting things to talk about as we're getting into more of a reality as far as the league is concerned. Looks like more and more that the league could be opening up as far as finishing the rest of the season or doing a playoffs or just getting back into some semblance of basketball. So it's looking more into that direction each and every day, each and every week. We're getting closer and closer to a definitive action on that. We're really happy about that. I know Governor Newsome in California, where you're at, has recently said that getting back to some semblance of sports without crowds has become a priority and has become something that he wants to get these sports teams involved. I want to hear your thoughts on that. And also, how happy are you now that the Lakers have had their practice facility open and are able to go ahead and start practicing at the facility once again?
Well, they're both really promising and encouraging things to happen for us to, keep hopes alive that we'll still be able to resume the season and defend what should be our 17th NBA championship. I think that, I was a little concerned just because the LA has been hit harder than the Bay Area, for example, in the coronavirus situation. And so you're a little worried about what the mayor is going to say about the team. So it's good to see Newsome come out, and it's good that the Lakers at least got permission to start not really practice, but at least opening up the facilities for the individual players to come in. And as you would expect, the individual players who have come in so far have been the guys that don't make the big bucks and probably don't have their own gyms the way that LeBron and AD, who each have their own gymnasium at home, can work out and take shots. The rest of the guys, if you live in a condominium or apartment building, you're looking at taking shots down in a driveway or something like that. So it's great for them to be able to get back in the facilities, be able to run on a full court, be able to get a little action in. And I'm sure they're taking all precautions to make sure that nobody gets contracts coronavirus. But those are good signs. It gives you just some semblance that it's going to be a new normal for sure. But at least we're starting to see some positivity that we're really going to have a chance at having that new normal and a chance to watch sports. Everybody seems to be prioritizing it from the president on down, and so that's a good sign. I'm looking forward to it, and I think that unless we have some giant setbacks, statistically with new cases and deaths and so forth, I expect that we're going to have a good chance at seeing basketball again.
And that would be a great thing indeed for everyone out there, including you and I, that we would see some semblance of basketball, NBA on the action, on the airwaves once again. And that's something I would look forward to, and I know you would as well.
Yep.
In fact, millions around the world would be excited to see NBA basketball once again, and where hopefully we could finish out a strong season for the Los Angeles Lakers. One of those things I wanted to talk about when it comes to a possible end-season scenario for the Los Angeles Lakers would be the competitors in the Western Conference, as they would hopefully gear towards that playoff drive, towards we hope anyways, a world championship, or at least we're expecting that because the team has been so great this year. One of the teams that they might face in a playoff scenario is the Utah Jazz. And there's some curious news that came out of Salt Lake City here this past week, and that is the injury to Bojan Bogdanovic in regards to having season-ending surgery was announced by the team to his wrist, which he says he hurt, I think, quite some time ago, at least over a year ago, and has been holding on to it ever since.
He's been shooting pretty well for a guy with a bad wrist.
Exactly, and somebody who, knowing that there is a possibility about returning to games on a playoff team that could make some waves in the NBA playoff. I still think they have enough talent to, if they get everything right, could be possibly someone that can make the semifinals, so to speak, as far as the playoffs. Maybe not necessarily the Western Conference Finals, but at least the semifinals, so to speak. That you would take possibly the individual that's been playing the most consistently good basketball for that team over the course of the year, which I think he has. I think he's been their best playing player. I don't think he's their best player. I still think that's Donovan Mitchell, but I think he's been their player that's played the best consistently over the course of the year. Why he would make this decision, or why the team would say, okay, let's go ahead and work on that, let's go ahead and do that at this point in time of the season. I understand it's a pain issue. I understand it's a discomfort issue, but it's something that if he were playing today, if the NBA was going on today and there was no COVID-19 or anything like that, he would be playing today right now, gearing up for the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange thing, and you wonder if in the background there's still this turmoil surrounding the relationships between some of the other Jazz players. You wonder whether the whole Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell thing is sort of taking a little bit of the shine off of their chances. They rank right now fourth in the league, so they'd be going up against Oklahoma City in the first round. So I don't expect them to be able to take care of Oklahoma City. I think that I never saw them really as a serious threat to really compete and get into even the semifinals. I think that they're a first round out team, and I think that that's a big reason why Bojan has decided that it's better to get healthy for next year and get his game together that way and take care of that lingering injury. And you just got to feel a little bit for a guy like that. I like both of the Bogdanovich guys, and Bojan has a little more size than his brother Bogdan, and has really become an outstanding player in the sense that he's a true stretch four who can really shoot that ball really well. I like a lot of the guys, that are on that team, and it's a shame that they've had this fallout, and you wonder what's going to happen, whether or not Rudy Gobert is going to be traded. I think it's more likely that they'll trade Gobert than they will Mitchell if the situation is not salvageable. But it's a hard thing, it's hard to get free agents to sign, with a team in Utah.
Well, it's something that I think the Utah Jazz, I think of them a little bit more fondly on paper than you do. I think they were a team that had the chance that they gelled together, could have gone a little bit farther than you're anticipating. I think weren't just a definite first-round loss. I think they could have made the semifinals real easy had they been gelling together as a team, because they had that period of time in December, January where they were playing really well and one of the best teams in the league. But it does speak to what you're talking about with the divisiveness that could potentially still be happening on that team. And it sounds to me like it's a clear indication from the team is that they're giving up on this season by telling Bojan to go ahead and get that wrist worked on, and that they're going to go ahead and focus in on what's coming up later this year when they start the season, either at Christmas time or whenever they start the next year's season. Sounds to me like they're going to be focusing more on that and pretty much essentially, I'm not going to say throwing in the towel on this year, but it, let's say, lessens their hopes quite a bit.
Well, they're only a game and a half out of third spot. So, but you'd put them up against the Houston Rockets most likely. So,
but it makes that decision much more strange.
The Western Conference is pretty tough, and if we go in a 6 or 7 game sort of get yourself ready for the playoffs by finishing 6 or 7 of the games that are on the schedule, it's a chance that they could move up in it. But I think that I think we're both in the same position that they sort of need to get into the off season and see what's going on with the relationship between Donovan and Rudy and try to figure out if they're going to make a big move. Trading Gobert is a big step, but the other side of it is Donovan Mitchell is the young star on that team, and he plays a position as a shooting guard that is a much more important position in the NBA today than a traditional back to the basket center who's basically just a defensive ace like Rudy.
Well, it's just something that is very interesting. Like you said, they're just out of third place, which to me is quite surprising that they would go ahead and say, you know what, go ahead, get your surgery. We're going to just chalk it off for this season.
Yeah.
Because you get in there and you have the right personnel at the top or at the coaching, and you could get this team centered straight to work out any differences. You have a team that could be third place in the Western Conference, and that's something with the right way that everything falls down. And I don't know if they're going to go play at home or whatnot, or how we're ever going to be able to structure it. This could be something where it's advantageous for them to go ahead and have a successful run in the playoffs. But you're right. It just speaks to me about the divisiveness that's going on in that team, and them saying at this point in time, you know what, we're looking at options down the road as opposed to what's taking place right now.
Well, there's another aspect of it too. When you look at the standings, they have 41 wins, 23 losses. There are 3 other teams right below them, the 5th, 6th, and 7th team, that only have 40 wins. So without Bogdanovich, if you play 5 or 6 or 7 games like that, they could easily slide down and end up being the 7th ranked team, which would definitely improve their lottery odds dramatically, or their draft position dramatically. And if they really have some internal camaraderie problems because of the dispute between Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, this could be sort of a smart and savvy move to throw the towel in, thinking that they could slide down into the standings rather than rising in the standings. They would have a hard time if the team is not, if the chemistry is off. They'd have a hard time going through 6 or 7 games and holding on to the position where they are right now. And the chances are much more likely that they would probably slide. I mean, you're looking at Oklahoma, Houston, and Dallas being the 3 teams sitting there with 1 less win than they are. So they could easily have ended up. They could easily end up now as the 7th pick in the 7th team in the West, and that is going to improve them probably half a dozen spots in the draft.
And you also got to consider that if this takes place on a neutral site, anything can happen. The teams that in 6th, 7th, 8th, they could see a better way or better pathway to success than what we've seen before from other 6th, 7th, and 8th place teams. I mean, a lot of people are pointing towards the lockout year, and that was the lockout. That was the year that I think that was the Mutombo Denver year that they beat, I think, Dallas in the playoffs. Dallas was number 1, Denver was number 8. And they beat them in that playoff series, and the famous Mutombo has the ball over his head as he's laying on the ground, that famous picture there. because of what went on during that course of that season that was kind of funky. Same thing is going on here.
Yep.
And if it does get played on a neutral site, you don't have that home crowd to think about. And that could be something that the Lakers, Milwaukee, Houston, Oklahoma City, all these playoff teams that you're talking about in both the East and the West need to think about how they play on a neutral court. I mean, a lot of people are talking about Philadelphia and how wretched they were on the road and how great they were at home. What happens now that they're thrown on a neutral site? What team are you going to get?
It's an interesting thought, because the NBA having been forced into this situation is really, you just don't know what's going to happen when teams come back. I mean, which guys have been working out and staying in good conditioning? I mean, a three week let's get back in shape. I've seen a lot of guys coming in on summer ready for the new season and not being at all ready, and it takes them a lot more than 3 weeks to get back into shape. Some of these guys may have eaten themselves right out of competition. And there's a couple of factors in it too, which is that the chances are the teams that are going to be in the playoffs, those guys probably have really paid attention, most of them, and have tried to stay in good condition and not let themselves get fat and easy. On the other hand, the other 14 teams that are going to be in the lottery, almost for sure, what are they looking forward to? They're looking forward to coming back and having to go through 3 weeks of training camp in order to play 5 or 6 games. A lot of those guys may not come back in the kind of shape that the 16 teams that are going to be in the playoffs are in. And so you may see some games that are looking like the Harlem Globetrotters versus the Washington Generals. I mean, you got a game against the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Golden State Warriors unmanned, man, some of those games are going to be brutal. I mean, it's not upsets from guys on the bottom of the ranks to upset some of those teams on the top is not going to be well, because the top teams are going to be looking to tune it up, to fine tune it, to get going. They want to go into the playoffs with as much head of steam as they can with just a 5-game thing. Teams like the Lakers, who were really rolling at the top of the league at that point in time, and had just had their great weekend where they took down their 2 nemesis that they had not beaten all year and had lost to in the Bucks and the Clippers. Now all of a sudden, that they're going to be shooting for bear that last 5 or 6 games. They're going to want to win every game, and they're going to be pouring it on. So we're going to see some very lopsided games, I think. And I think that they're going to play some games because nobody wants to go into the playoffs with the playoffs being the first game you play. But I don't think this is going to be like Major League Baseball, where you're going to see some upsets in the wild card game and some surprises coming into the playoffs. I think what's going to happen is the good teams are all going to just romp their way through. I haven't looked at the schedule.
I'm not so sure on that. I'm going to be honest with you.
On the schedule, that's something that I'm going to take a look at after this podcast. Is let's take a look at the schedule. It's a good topic to bring up next week. Let's look at the schedule and see which big matchups are sitting there in that first 6 or 7 game schedule that every team faces coming back.
I'm still not 100% sold on that idea, especially if, first of all, if it's a scenario where it's a 2 out of 3 or a 3 out of 5. I think
it's going to be a 7-game series.
Well, I'm hoping it'll be 7-game series.
Silver pretty much said that. He said that, and I think that there's good reasoning behind that. You'd rather go longer and make it a 7-game series because you're already going to get an asterisk by every team that didn't win. Every team that doesn't win is going to say, "Oh man, this is not a real season." And there's a valid argument for it because the season has been interrupted more than any other season you can remember, even including the lockout. So you want to play those 7-game series so that you can at least say, I didn't take a shortcut to win a championship if you win a championship.
You want to play those games because you want the TV money. Let's put it all right out there, man.
Well, there's also that too. It's true. I mean, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it. If guys test positive, that's just like an injury during the playoffs. That's just like what happened to the Warriors last year. If a couple of guys test positive in the NBA Finals, it'll be just like Clay and KD getting injured. That's how they're going to treat it, and they want to play 7-game series all the way through. They don't want compromise the integrity of the playoffs. Because that, by nature, will compromise the integrity of the championship.
That's true, but dollars doesn't hurt.
Yeah, little dollars are going to make a big thing. I mean, 40% of the revenue. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I know that they said 40% of the revenue comes from the fans, but I remember reading that it was like 25% comes from the regular season revenue. That means that 15%, or if you're talking 15 of 40%, 40% of the total revenue from fans attending games during the season is the playoffs.
Well, it's 40%. It's on an average, it's 40%. Because you're talking about non-playoff teams, playoff teams, carrying it over as far as what their TV contracts versus what they get as far as home attendance, gate, and things of that nature. So the average is roughly around 40% per franchise.
Right.
So I'll tell you what, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Again, we're just hoping for a confirmation, but it's looking like the NBA is heading on a path towards a completion of the season. I'm looking forward to it. Although on a neutral site, I think it'll be a little bit more interesting than LakerTom has alluded to. I think it'll be a little bit more interesting in one or two of the series.
Going to be a lot of slaughters.
There could be a lot of that as well. We're signaling the ref for a quick timeout, but we'll be back with more of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
I see the potential for basically like another Netflix kind of paradigm shift where here comes this other major player. They have a ton of resources. Apple could change the way that entertainment is consumed.
They say it's the only time this year that you'll have stars from each brand battling each other, and we know it's not going to be the case, but they like to say that, and more power to them, I guess.
Well, it's a big first step, bringing all those superheroes together. There were definitely some parts of the movie that I really enjoyed, and then there were some parts that I thought just kind of fell short of expectation.
Part of it has to be something to do with how it's being promoted, and this is a thing where audiences do not agree with critics.
That's the Pop Culture Cosmos Show.
And the PCC Multiverse, every week on Apple Podcasts.
And over a dozen of your favorite streaming and podcasting options. Once again, I'm talking to Tom Wong, a.k.a. LakerTom from Lakerholics.net. You got to be part of the conversation today at Lakerholics.net. I wanted to devote this back half of the podcast to what ifs. And it always seems to be lately as far as what ifs when we've been hearing all that's going on with The Last Dance. And hopefully we can minimize our conversations from after this podcast going forward on The Last Dance, because I think every NBA fan out there has seen or heard like a gazillion Last Dance podcasts, because there's not been much else to talk about. Except for if you listen to this channel, you've heard a lot more than just The Last Dance. But we'll talk about The Last Dance one last time, so to speak. Here,
Our Last Dance, you mean?
Yes, Our Last Dance with The Last Dance. Because it came out in a recent podcast, LeBron's thoughts on The Last Dance and those years with the Bulls and when they're winning championships. And he thought if he were in, and Pippen wasn't in there, and he was in his place, that he would have been a great sidekick for his attributes and what he brings to the game as far as his strengths would have really meshed in with what Michael Jordan was doing out there on the floor. I want to hear your thoughts on that. Would LeBron have been a great, let's say, Robin to Jordan's Batman?
I don't think there's any doubt in that. I mean, frankly, if you're talking about the consensus, at least at this point in time in the game, Michael Jordan is still considered to be the number one player and the GOAT. I personally think, and as I've said many times on our broadcasts and at Lakerholics.net, that ultimately that's a fair comparison because LeBron's not done yet. And when LeBron wins 2 or 3 more championships with the Lakers, I think he will surpass MJ and become the number one player in the minds of most of the announcers. I mean, I saw that recent poll where they said 73% of the fans said that Jordan is the better player than LeBron, and you go back and you dig into the individual stats, the individual features that they do, they're actually saying some stupid things like players would rather play with Michael Jordan than LeBron. Nobody's going to want to do that. Or Michael Jordan is a better passer than LeBron James. That's totally ridiculous. So I think in the true measure of the things, as great as Scottie Pippen is, and talk about a guy who was probably trashed more than anybody else in his entire Last Dance sequence, putting LeBron James and Michael Jordan together, my God, he's the perfect player to play with Michael Jordan or with Kobe Bryant or with any great, shoot first shooting guard whose game is basically built around scoring. I mean, the opportunities that a guy like LeBron would give him, you could say the same thing with Magic Johnson playing with Michael Jordan. And those are just the synergy you get from a pass-first superstar, one of the top 5 players in the history of the game, playing with a shoot-first superstar who's also one of the top 5 players in the history of the game. That's almost an unbeatable combination. So I can totally understand how LeBron would be enthralled with that whole thing, especially when he grew up as a Bulls fan, and he's rooting for Jordan and just like Kobe, they all wanted to be MJ and they all wanted to play with MJ. And there's some great stories about how he got a chance, I think, and he was invited to Jordan's camp. And after they sent the kids all home, 8 or 8:30, they'd play a game at 8:30 and they'd let the kids watch. Then they'd send the kids away and the real games would start, And LeBron said that he had played with MJ on MJ's team in all of those games and they never lost any of those games. But the other side of it is that LeBron also said that, well, as much as he would love to have been the sidekick, if you will, to Michael Jordan, he also really just loved the idea of being the guy who could play against him. And that's an interesting thing when you look at that whole situation, because it's like Kawhi's decision that he wanted to play against LeBron rather than joining LeBron. And that's a big change from the years of Jordan's years, because in Jordan's time, the great superstars didn't want to band together like they did, in LeBron's time. LeBron started that whole thing with the big 3 in Miami, and that was something that you'd never have seen Kobe do or MJ do. They basically felt that they were alone enough. All they needed to do was have a good team around them. They didn't need another superstar in order to be able to be the best in the world and so forth. So I think that, I don't know how anybody could even claim that LeBron would not be the best sidekick you could ever give to Michael Jordan, unless it was somebody like Magic Johnson.
Well, I'll tell you what, my friend, seeing him as a Pippen to MJ would have been something great indeed. I think, like you said, they would have won more titles had that been the case, because playing with LeBron there.
I don't think he'd have gone and played baseball and gone on to wanting to go to, regardless of wanting to go play for the Washington Wizards, in those situations. One thing I would add is that the other side of it, too, is that one of the things that Pippen was so good was putting 2 of the top 5 defenders in the league together, because Scottie was a terrific defender and always, really took a lot of load off of Michael, who was also an elite defender.
And then you had Rodman for some of that time. And then you had Rodman.
There you go. That's a hard hand. You can shut down teams for good periods of games with 3 guys like that. LeBron, at his best, in his peak years, is as good a defender as we've ever seen too. So, that's the one thing, whereas if somebody like Magic just couldn't compete in that same level of being able to replace Scottie Pippen the way that LeBron James could.
Well, it would have been something to see, and something that you and I would have been reflecting on as far as the level of greatness that we already talk about when it comes to the Bulls, but it would have been even greater had LeBron been a 1A to Michael Jordan's 1. Although being known as the greatest of all time, by the time LeBron leaves, I still think that's up for debate. I still think a lot of people will rely upon his airness as being the greatest of all time. I do not
5
think
more years, 3 more championships. A lot of
he'll
those
have to get above 6.
A lot of those Michael Jordan guys are going to be gone, and they'll be in the wind at that point.
But you got to remember, Jordan is undefeated in the finals. Right now, LeBron is 3-6.
He also didn't have the competition. You can't tell me that the Utah Jazz were the competition that that, let's say, the Boston Celtics were to the Lakers.
I'm just telling you what people will tell you, my friend.
I know.
And you got to remember that as great as LeBron is and as well known as LeBron is, it's not his likeness on every Nike that's right out there, Nike product.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, I mean, you're not going to get rid of Jordan anytime soon. So.
No, but there'll be a point in time when people will recognize, once LeBron's career is done, that he will become the GOAT, even though that you can't really compare the generations.
He'll have to get to 7. He'll have to be 7-3.
Well, I'll give you here. Let's flip this around. He'll have to get 6. 6 is a good number. 3 Laker championships. But how about this one? How about look at this? What if you were to take LeBron and put him back in Michael's era, and take Michael and move him into the current era? Michael's going to have to shoot a lot better from 3 in order to play the game today.
And Michael would. I think especially later in his years, he became much more proficient three-point shooter. In fact, he competed in the three-point tournaments as far as from the All-Star game and whatnot. I think he would have. Jordan, to me, seems like the guy, throw out a challenge like Kobe. Throw out a challenge, he'll get it done. Now, Kobe was never efficient 100% throughout the course of a given season, but he still was tied for the record.
Michael, by the same token, Michael never saw a shot he didn't like.
But that's
same
true.
With Kobe, you don't shoot 50, 40, and 90 when you're Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant.
No, but Kobe has the points in time. Like I was going to say, Kobe has tied for the record 12 3-pointers in one game. So. Right. He has that ability. He had that ability. He had that capability.
Well, with not Jordan, many guys would take 12 3-pointers in a game.
Yeah. Well,
you can count those guys on your hands, too.
Yes. And with Jordan, I think, like I said, you put anything in front of him outside.
They're the ultimate competitors. I get your point, and I agree 100%. You want guys who are killers.
Outside of owning an NBA team, everything else you put in front of him, he's been very good at. But we won't.
Kind of a strange. Now, there's a strange thing. Why do you think MJ has been such a dud as the owner of the Hornets?
That's, I think.
My God.
Well,
it comes really down to
sad. It comes down to market, and it comes down to money. I think those are the two factors. He has a lot of money, but he doesn't have maybe as much as, let's say, some of his other, I own several businesses, and I'm able to go ahead and use this.
Yeah, but some of those personnel decisions have been pretty shaky.
Oh, that's because of the people he has in place. Now he has Kupchak there.
That's what I said.
Yes.
Some of those decisions have been pretty shaky.
Yes. Get Kupchak there to make some trades for us. Give us some nice draft picks there.
Yeah, I would have thought that they had a point guard that could have been really good for us there for many years. It's a shame that he went to Boston.
Yeah, well, what can I say? But yes. I don't see a great future for them as an organization still, but yeah, Jordan is not materialized an owner, but I will never question him as a player. There was just at this point in time no better.
I was always a Kobe fan over Jordan, so it's always hard for me to give Jordan any credit for anything.
Well, I'm not saying favorite. I'm not saying I'm a Jordan fan. I'm just saying I'm looking at it objectively.
No, I'm saying I'm biased. I'm biased against Michael. I can't help it.
Trying to look at it objectively. Like I try to do a lot of things come right here, the Lakers Fast
That's
Break.
Right. You can be the objective guy, and I'll be the fan.
Okay, glass half full, glass half empty.
That's right.
There you go. We'll be back with more of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Needing an edge for your fantasy football team? Listen to the guys at Inside Sports Fantasy Football for insight that will help you reach your league championship. That's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Check it out today on your favorite podcast outlet. Speaking of what ifs, and we'll close out the show with this, my friend, before we get into what's going on at Lakerholics.net. What if in 2011 we wouldn't even be talking about LeBron today because he would be playing for the Dallas Cowboys? Because in 2011, there was a very real possibility, because he was working out with the Dallas Cowboys, that he would have gone over and played full-time in the NFL. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. He definitely has the type of build in order to be successful there, with his speed, with his jumping ability, with his sheer size, both not only from a frame standpoint, but obviously his height. he would have been successful at any position that he would have decided he could go and choose to play in football. So your thoughts on him, what kind of level of success would he have reached in the NFL?
Oh, I don't have a doubt that he would have been a star. I tend to think, though, it's a lot like MJ's desire to play baseball. Had he gone out of college and gone into the MLB and devoted his career to developing his craft as a baseball player, I have no doubt that Michael Jordan would have been a superstar in that sport, just like he was in basketball. And I would say the same thing is absolutely 100% true of LeBron James. However, just like Michael really couldn't just change gears and take a year off and go and become, Babe Ruth, LeBron James would have some questions about whether he could really make the jump into football against guys who had played that sport all the way through college and for many years in a professional. As to positions, I mean, my God, he'd be a hell of a tight end. He could redefine what a wide receiver would be. And frankly, one of the things that I never hear anybody talk about is that I would have loved to have seen him as a quarterback, a running quarterback, sort of like the guy who won the Super Bowl last time. I mean, can you imagine coming around
Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, could you imagine? I mean, you think about it, Mahomes, how would you like to be able to defend LeBron in the backcourt there? I mean, he pitch him the ball out and he's rolling out and he's got an arm like a rocket ship, and we saw how accurate he can throw those half-court passes, those full-court passes. I'm not so sure that, just like point guard is really maybe his best pure position in the game of basketball, I'm not so sure that quarterback might not be his best position in the game of football. And talk about a guy that he has the size to see over the line, just like he does as a point guard. That's one of the advantages he's got. Trying to bring him down in the backfield, once he gets out in the open field, the moves that he'd be able to make in the open field, it would be something to watch, Maybe somewhere there's an alternate universe, Gerald, and Michael is out there playing baseball and LeBron's playing football. But thank God in our gaze, in our universe, that we had the opportunity to see them both play basketball. As much as I grew up loving baseball and football as a kid in Wisconsin, once I got to California, basketball became my game. And I don't think there's a game that's anywhere near it. And I think that being a superstar in baseball or football can't compare, in my opinion, to being a superstar in basketball.
Well, I'm thankful that he did stay in the NBA, that he didn't lean towards the NFL, because it's so much more a violent game, so there could be possibilities of injury. Yeah. He wouldn't be playing today. I don't think he'd be playing today if that's the case.
Not at 35. Well, but hey, another reason why you play quarterback, man.
Yeah, that's true. They do play at an older age.
Isn't there a guy, I think there's an old white guy at 40 that's 42, is it?
That's Brady. There's also Drew Brees. Aaron Rodgers is past 35. So you're right. If he plays quarterback, he could have had a nice.
He only got to play 16 games a year instead of a grueling 82 plus another 30 in the playoffs.
But also have a 350-pound defensive end right down your throat too. That's not exactly the greatest thing in the world.
Yep.
Well, I'll tell you what, my friend, it's been a great episode indeed. I cannot thank you enough for joining me. Once again, it's Tom Wong. I know him as Tom Wong. You know him as LakerTom. He's everywhere that he can be, at LakerTom on Twitter, hopefully proposing out not only his great articles that come on Medium.com, maybe some crazy trades again every now and then that seems to get the internet in an uproar, but also his great stuff going on at Lakerholics.net. So before we head on out, my friend, I want you to go ahead and elaborate to everyone out there what's going on with Lakerholics.net and why they should hang out there for a spell at Lakerholics.net.
Well, we've got a lot of great conversations going on at Lakerholics.net. Right now, we're in the midst of, I've written a series of 6 articles about who is going to be the superstar that's going to take the mantle as the best player in the next decade, meaning a decade of the 2020s. In the 2010s, we had LeBron. In the 1990s, we had Kobe. In the 80s, it was Jordan in the 90s, Kobe in the 2010s, and Magic in the 80s. And so we've got 6 candidates, and I'm basically presenting them one at a time in LakerHolics.net. We just had Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is probably the favorite at 25 years old. I followed that up with Kawhi Leonard, 31-year-old, or 28-year-old, excuse me. Coming out tomorrow is Kevin Durant at 31, and that'll be followed up by Anthony Davis, Luka Doncic, and finally by Zion Williamson as the 6 players that I think have a shot at it. It's an interesting conversation. We've sort of identified 3 criteria that are going to determine who's going to be the player of the decade, if you will, to take the throne from LeBron. And I think there are 3 factors that really will determine it. One being obviously how good the player is and so forth, their own skill sets and such. Secondly, their age. It's awful hard for someone like Durant to last, he'd be 41 by the end of the decade, whereas a young guy like Zion will only be 29 at the end of the decade, maybe not even into his prime. Whereas guys like Giannis and Anthony Davis at 25 and 27 might have an advantage age-wise. Next comes injuries. We've already seen that Durant's got a major injury. Kawhi's got a major injury. Zion in only 1 year has had a major injury. So that's another factor that goes in there. And the third factor basically is that you're not going to be the dominant player for the decade unless you win championships. And so what are your chances of your team being able to win championships? A lot of it's going to have Giannis in the next couple of years is going to have to make some big decisions about how that affects his career and his legacy. Players like Luka playing with the Mavericks. Yeah, the Mavericks did win that one championship, but boy, that's a hard road to hoe in the eras of double and triple superstar teams. Kawhi, can he last that long? Doubtful, so when you go through those, I think the guy who could surprise everybody might be Anthony Davis, because he hasn't had a major injury. He's at the right age so that he would still be in his prime going into the last half of the decade. And naturally, whoever shines in the last half of the decade is going to get an advantage over the guys who were stars in the first half of the decade. And in a championship issue, if being with LeBron can bring him 2 or 3 rings before he takes over the Lakers, he could have a leg up on it. So it's an interesting discussion. We've got the articles coming out all of next week. So it'll be a great time for you to stop by LakerHolics.net, put your 2 cents in, make your opinions, let it be known who you think is. And it's a great discussion. And we have topics like that are going on all the time. And it's just a great place for fans, especially when the season is on, but when you're hard up for a good basketball discussion with a bunch of people who are going to respect your opinions and have a very cordial and friendly atmosphere, LakerHolics.net's a great place to do it.
And once again, that's LakerHolics.net. Be part of the conversation today at LakerHolics.net. Well, my friend, it's been a great episode. Looking forward to our conversations next week. Any last thoughts on the way out?
Nope. Looking forward to some basketball. I mean, I'd like to get some good news and something to look forward to as we move ahead. It doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of schools opening up, but it does seem like there's almost a yearning for sports that everybody has seemed to come. I mean, you're hearing about the NFL, you're hearing about MLB. Everybody seems to understand that one of the things that's really allowed us to escape, if you will, from the day-to-day drudgery and things that are going on in life and the dealings you have to deal with every day is sports, and we really miss it. We've all got that need to fill that void, and I mean, you can only do so many videos, and you can only do so many movies, and only so many books. I've been binge booking and binge movieing and so forth, and I'm give me the Charlotte Hornets versus anybody, and I'll watch it. I'm up for NBA basketball, and I'm looking forward to it.
I know I am as well. But I'll tell you what, it's just been great talking to you. Also, if you get a chance, please, if you need more content out there to listen to, hopefully you can give our last, 6 weeks of Lakers Fast Breaks ever since this coronavirus started to take place. I've got a lot of episodes that I put out there on the Lakers Fast Break channel that are still relevant today that people can listen to, that are really some great conversations with so many different people on the NBA draft and so much more. I tell you what, please, if you get a chance and you need more stuff to listen to, hopefully you'll give us a chance right here at the Lakers Fast Break. Well, my friend, it's been great talking to you once again. I look forward to our conversation next week right here on the Lakers Fast Break podcast.